All right, Fridays mean Chase Senior's in the house, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Do the Niners need another quarterback? We'll talk about that. We got a bunch of things to hit. Welcome. It's the Krug Show on a Friday. Join us. All right, well,
you're muted, Larry.
look at that.
There we go.
So you heard none of it. You heard none of it. We're
Hey.
brought to you by
There we go.
We're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week. We're also brought to you by our good friends at Sharp Corners Sports Cards and Collectibles. They are at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California. Anthony Catania, give him a call. He's at 831-521-5264 for all your sports cards and collectible needs. And then, of course, as you see above Chase's head, we're brought to you by LearnKey. LearnKey is fantastic. The show is sponsored by LearnKey Upskill Academy, an online learning platform designed to get you job ready in 6 months or less. Doesn't matter what field. It could be cybersecurity, marketing, IT. They offer over 30 certification programs to help you take that next step in your professional career. 37 years they've been in business. They've helped over 200,000 students. They place hundreds of students in well-paying jobs each and every month. The links are in the description below, and we'll tell you a little bit later on about the LearnKey draft challenge contest that we have going on right now as well. But thanks to all of our sponsors, and the links are in the description below. All right, we're off and running on a Friday. Chase Senior's in the house from Chat Sports. Chase, good to see you, man. And we titled this, Should the Niners Draft a Quarterback? The Brock Purdy thing, it's like we don't know when the deal's going to get done, if it's going to get done. The Niners do have Mac Jones. The Niners do have Tanner Mordecai. And yet some people are suggesting that because they're in the midst of a rebuild, and they may not be in the Super Bowl hunt, that they ought to lean into it and maybe trade Purdy for a pick, and go with Shedeur Sanders at 11 if he's there, and kind of reset their entire deal instead of paying Purdy big money, spread that money around the roster and continue to go with a quarterback on a rookie deal. What do you think, Chase? Are you an advocate for, if Shedeur is there at 11, should the Niners pull the trigger on a quarterback in the first round?
It's a really interesting conversation to have, and it's one that I've noticed a lot of fans have brought up on the 49ers Report when I've been live or when I put up regular videos. And I think the thought process here that comes to mind for me, and why fans have brought it to the forefront of the conversation going into the NFL draft at the end of April, you think about everything that the Niners have done this offseason, right? They've let a lot of former starters walk. They've freed up a lot of money. They're eating more than $80 million in dead cap this year instead of spreading it out over the next couple of years. And they really want to build through the draft. They have 11 picks coming up. Then they're loaded with draft capital in the 2026 draft as well, including a bevy of picks in the first 4 rounds. And clearly the Niners aren't quite rebuilding, I would say. I think it's more of an organizational reset. And after the year when they went 6-11, I hinted that something like this could be coming, where when you have a lot of players on the roster like the Niners have, Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Deommodore Lenoir, Malik Mustafa, Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall. You don't quite have to rebuild your organization. And I think last year, the ugly nature of the 2024 season made it feel like the Niners were really far off. I don't think they're that far off, but clearly they're resetting the organization a little bit. And so I think the thought process from a lot of fans, and the one, again, that comes to my mind is, if you're going to reset and you're bordering on this rebuild, and you haven't gotten a contract extension done with Brock Purdy yet you've cleared up a lot of money to pay him, does it just make sense, if you're not in love with Purdy, to trade him away or have him play out the final year of his contract, and then you draft a quarterback at number 11. A quarterback who could be available at number 11 is Shedeur Sanders. He could go to the Browns at number 2. He could go to the Giants at number 3. After that, I don't see a team that's going to take Shedeur. And in a late quarterback class, I think in previous years, he might be a second-round pick. But he might fall to San Francisco at number 11 because it is a thin quarterback class. And so what would happen there is if you trade away Purdy, you don't have to pay him that contract extension between $50 and $60 million. You reset your organization to a degree where you now have a lot of cap space for the foreseeable future because you're not paying a quarterback. And then you reset that quarterback window with a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, who I think Kyle Shanahan would really like. You know, he led college football in completion percentage last year at 72.5%. He processes very well. When other teams try to blitz him, he's able to make really quick decisions. I think he throws with really good timing, touch, and accuracy. He's not a great athlete as far as making plays with his legs, and he doesn't have a cannon for an arm. And I think Cam Ward is a lot better than him. He's QB1 on my board. But Shedeur Sanders is that type of cerebral, high football IQ, get the ball out on time, in rhythm, accurately to your playmaker so that they can pick up yards after the catch that Kyle Shanahan would like. Now, ultimately, I don't think the Niners are going to do that. Their posturing and everything that they've said is that they're going to get a deal done with Brock Purdy, but it has to really be a conversation, I believe, that the Niners are having. Look, if we want to rebuild, don't pay a quarterback $50 to $60 million. If you want to fully rebuild, clearly Jed York is all in on Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Do you reset that quarterback room financially, build out the rest of your roster, and try to take advantage of that quarterback being on that rookie deal? Look at what the Texans are doing with C.J. Stroud. Look at what the Commanders are doing with Jaden Daniels. Look at what the Patriots are doing with Drake May. And this has really served as a way to build a Super Bowl team. Take advantage of that quarterback being on that rookie contract. The Eagles did it with Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz. The Chiefs did it early with Patrick Mahomes. The Bengals did it with Joe Burrow. And now you see these teams trying to maximize that rookie quarterback contract window. So again, I don't think the Niners go that route. I do think it's a very interesting conversation to have because even though I think Shedeur is more of a second-round guy, he clearly has more overall talent than a player like Brock Purdy.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not a Shedeur guy at all. I saw him in the bowl game against BYU. I didn't think he looked good at all. Now, he does complete a high percentage, but it's a lot of times because he's throwing the ball short. But yeah, if you look at some of the games, 69%, 82%, 79, 73, 69, 83, 69, 85, 80, 61, 73. I mean, 76. He completed 74% for the year. That's a high completion percentage.
Yep. With bad offensive line play too.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is this guy doesn't process. I mean, when you say he processes well, he held the ball a ton this year. I mean, the guy had he was sacked 42 times on the year. He had 5 or 6 games where he was sacked over 5 times. That's a lot. He was sacked 8 times in the Baylor game. He was sacked 10 times in the final 2 games of the season against Oak State and then the Alamo Bowl against BYU. 6 against Oak State, 4 against BYU. So to me, and then mobility-wise, he's not fast.
No.
He had negative 50 yards rushing for the season on 100 carries. So he's not a runner. He's not a runner. He's not a runner, and he holds the ball really a long time. So I don't know. I mean, I know he had a high completion percentage, but I thought he looked really bad in the bowl game. I thought he was all over the place. He was just all over the place. I mean, high, low, didn't look like he knew what he wanted to do. Sometimes he bailed from the pocket soon. I hear you about the concept of resetting the quarterback market. And getting a quarterback on a rookie deal is very attractive. But it's also, you have to have a quarterback. Most rookie quarterbacks can't play. Yeah. So if you pick a quarterback that can't play, you're cooked. So the key is to find a rookie quarterback that can play and that you can win with. So is there a quarterback in this draft that fits that description? I love Cam Ward, but he's reckless as hell with the football. I mean, he holds it like a loaf of bread when he runs. He takes all kinds of chances. He holds the ball around his waist a lot of times when it should be up around his ear. He's really reckless, but he's an alpha. He's a leader. He's tough. He's smart. I think he's aggressive. There's a lot to like about Cam, but I don't like Shedeur, and I'm not a big Jackson Dart guy. Don't like Jalen Milroe. Don't like college quarterbacks that spend 7 years in college. Sorry, Tyler Shugg.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dalen Gabriel. If you play 7 years in college, you can't play in the pros. I would say more times than not. So what, I'm not a Will Howard guy. Liked him a little bit at K-State. Didn't like him as much at Ohio State. I thought Ewers looked bad at the combine. I mean, I know he looked way better at the pro day, but he looked bad in Mobile in Indy. I didn't think he looked good at all. Throwing against air, you're supposed to look great. He didn't look great. So I guess I'm a little down on trying to find a quarterback in this draft. The quarterbacks that I like in this draft that I believe in would be Kyle McCord from Syracuse. I really like McCord, and I like what I saw this year from him, especially going to Gadsden. I really liked Riley Leonard. I thought Riley Leonard, I was convinced that people were telling me he didn't have enough arm, and then he went to Mobile. He threw the ball great. He looked great. There's something about Riley Leonard that's magical. I love the athleticism of Brady Cook. I love the talent, arm-throwing talent of Taylor Elgersma. And I kind of like the Memphis kid a little bit, Seth Hennigan. But I kind of like Peyton Thorne, who one of his teammates, I had Eugene Asante on, and he said they call Peyton Thorne the white Michael Vick or something like that. I forget exactly what he was something with Michael Vick, something Vick, but Peyton Thorne can run from Auburn, and his dad was a football coach. His grandfather played football, so he's kind of an interesting guy to me. I like Peyton Thorne as a day 3 flyer. I like Elgersma. I like Brady Cook. I like Riley Leonard, and I like Kyle McCord. Do you like any of those quarterbacks? And would you consider resetting with a non-first round quarterback, or does it have to be Shedeur?
Yeah, the thing too, when you draft a quarterback in the first round, you can exercise that 5th-year option. And so you get that extra year of team control on a cost-controlled contract. And just a couple more things.
Vanilla Vic is what they call
Vanilla Vic. I love that. I love that. Great to see some viewers of the 49ers Report in here too. I see him in the comment section. Leon Sandcastle's one of them. Joji's another one, and some more people. But yeah, a couple more notes on Shedeur, right? Like I hear you. The sacks are a problem. The lack of pocket presence is sometimes an issue. I do think that at times he does process well, and he throws with good touch and accuracy. I think the processing is why he's able to complete a high percentage of his throws. Couple of issues. The offensive line play with Colorado was a joke. And then Pat Shermer's been his offensive coordinator the last couple of years. And I know that he was a head coach and an OC and a quarterback's coach at the NFL level. But the offensive concepts that he was running and calling were archaic. I hated the routes. I don't think that it was quarterback friendly. There wasn't a lot of innovation. There wasn't a ton of pre-snap motion. A lot of times it was, let's rely on Travis Hunter to make a play and for Shedeur to get it to him. And that's just not a sustainable way to play football. So again, I wouldn't take Shedeur at number 11, but it is an interesting conversation to have. To your question about other quarterbacks in this class.
Yeah, do you like some of these other guys?
I do like some of these other guys. And if I was Kyle Shanahan, I think 2 players who fit what I look for in a quarterback, talking about the traits that I threw out there a little bit earlier that we've seen from Brock Purdy, that we've seen from Jimmy Garoppolo, that we've seen to a lesser degree, but in moments from a Nick Mullins and a CJ Beathard, players who can run the system, players who can process well, players who will get the ball out rhythmically, on time, accurately, and honestly have a lot of experience at the college level to the point where when they come in and have to learn a complex Kyle Shanahan offense, which is not easy, have a lot of experience at the college level. Those 2 quarterbacks are Will Howard of Ohio State, who transferred from Kansas State, and then Kyle McCord, who Will Howard replaced at Ohio State, who then transferred to Syracuse. Kyle McCord is a player who played in 37 games in his college career. Will Howard played for 5 years, and he played in 50 games. And I think one of the reasons why Brock Purdy was able to come in early, not be phased, and not be flustered is because of all of the big game and overall experience that he had at Iowa State. But players like Will Howard and Kyle McCord, they're not going to wow you with their arm strength, although it's strong enough to get the ball downfield. They're not going to wow you with their athleticism. Will Howard can make plays happen with his feet much more so than Kyle McCord. I think Kyle McCord has more of a gunslinger mentality. He'll stand taller in the pocket a little bit, but they will run the system. They are a good extension of the play caller, which is what Kyle Shanahan likes because he wants quarterbacks who will run his system. And I do think that they are smart. They are cerebral. They are good leaders. They're not phased. They're always cool, calm, and collected. And so, unfortunately, because it is such a thin quarterback class, I think that a team might take a chance on Will Howard in the second round. Way too early for the Niners to take a quarterback in the second round, in my opinion. Kyle McCord is a player, though, who could be available in the third or fourth round, late on day 2, early day 3, that I would be willing to take a chance on. I know the Niners have a lot of needs, multiple along the offensive line, multiple along the defensive line, linebacker, corner, maybe another wide receiver, another running back, which I think is inevitable because of it being a deep running back class. But the quarterback position is always one that I'm an advocate for investing in and developing in. And we don't really know what Tanner Mordecai is, right? Brock Purdy, Mac Jones, that's a good starter and QB2, but I'd love to see the 49ers draft the Kyle McCord, have him on the team for 4 years, develop him, because I think that he can be a high-level backup or at some point a solid starter. And with McCord specifically, because I think it's more realistic that the Niners can get him, you know, last year, he led the nation in completions, led the nation in attempts, led the nation in passing yards with nearly 4,800, 34 touchdowns. He did throw 12 picks. So the turnovers were a little bit of a problem, but the jump in confidence that I saw year over year from Ohio State, where it wasn't on the same page with Ryan Day, they basically pushed him out of that program, to what he did under Fran Brown at Syracuse was impressive. And he was a big reason why Syracuse was able to put together a really good season. And so McCord is probably the player that I like the most. I would take a flyer on Quinn Ewers depending on where he falls. He's just way too lazy with his mechanics, and I think that would drive Kyle Shanahan crazy as far as arm talent goes and big game experience. He put Texas football back on the map. Now, sometimes he can get lackadaisical with some of the mechanics, and sometimes he can have some shaky moments when the pressure cooker is on, but I'm not asking that quarterback to play right away. So those are a couple of the other quarterbacks who I like.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, quarterback is the most important position, and you got to have a guy. And not only that, you got to, you have to have sometimes more than a guy. You have to have more than one guy.
Yep.
Dallas just traded for Joe Milton, the third. I thought that was interesting. Let's role play, okay? I'll be John Lynch. You be, who could you be? You be Howie Roseman.
Okay.
How about that? Okay. Howie Lynch over here. Just for shits and giggles, what do you want if we want Tanner McKee? What do you want in return?
Well, here's the thing, John. We traded away Kenny Pickett to the Cleveland Browns, brought in Dorian Thompson-Robinson to be our QB3, but we made that move because we know that Tanner McKee is better than Kenny Pickett, and we need him to be QB2. And look at our organization's history since the turn of the century. We've had to rely on a lot of backups to win big games, John. A.J. Feely, Coy Detmer, Jeff Garcia, Michael Vick. We won a Super Bowl with the backup in Nick Foles. This past year, Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee had to play. So given the importance of the quarterback position and how much we like the player, we're going to ask for a second or third round pick for Tanner McKee.
I think that's probably pretty fair, Howie. But come on, we know and you know that Jalen's your guy, and he's not going to miss any games, does he? Jalen doesn't miss games, so
He's
you're
missed
talking
some
about
though, John. He's missed some.
He's missed some, but he's probably not going to miss too many. McKee makes a lot. To me, I think McKee is a guy that I think the Niners would love to have.
I agree.
That would be my guess. Just because, the Stanford connection, not only that, he's a big kid, good arm, very accurate, and he's 24. So to me, if I really didn't want to, if by chance I didn't believe in Mac Jones, didn't believe in Tanner Mordecai, and thought that I wanted another quarterback, I might trade that third round pick. I mean, would I rather take Kyle McCord in the third round, or would I rather have Tanner McKee for a third round pick? Who would you rather have? If you could get Tanner McKee for your third, and let's just say you could trade back from 11 and get an extra third. So you trade back from 11 to 20, maybe you're taking a defensive lineman in the 20s, you get an extra third for moving back, you flip that to Philly for Tanner McKee. Would you rather flip that to Philly for Tanner McKee, or would you rather take a third round quarterback like a McCord?
Well, I think McKee is better than McCord. And I honestly think that McKee, if he's ever given an opportunity, I think that he can be a pretty solid starter in this league. I really do. He's really tall, 6'6". He sees the field really well. He throws with unbelievable anticipation to the sideline. Like the back shoulder balls that he's able to throw, it's really impressive. Good arm strength, good pocket mobility. He's not going to make plays out of structure. He's pretty tall and a little bit slow-footed, kind of like Nick Foles. Like he reminds me a lot of Nick Foles a little bit, who in 2013, Chip Kelly's first year, he threw 27 touchdowns and 2 picks. Like he set a record at that time, won a Super Bowl when he caught fire. He was inconsistent, certainly up and down, but I think McKee can be like that type of player, maybe even a little bit better. And he is going into year 3, so he has 2 more years left on his contract. McCord would have 2 more years on top of that left on his deal, but I think McKee is better. But I think the Eagles like him to a point where if Jalen Hurts were to ever get hurt, they have a lot of confidence that he can step in and play extremely well.
Yeah, no, I know there's no question. I mean, the Eagles are not looking to move Tanner McKee.
Yeah.
But
that was a good role play, though. I'll tell you, by me and you. That was good.
Yeah, and I will say this. I agree with you. I think Tanner McKee's an NFL starter. I really do. 6'6". I did the Stanford pregame. This guy's got a laser. I mean, this guy throws lasers. I mean, this guy can really zip it to the sideline and put a ton on the football. I'm not saying he's Flacco, but he's got more than a good arm. He's got a very good arm. Okay, if it wasn't Tanner McKee, is there another quarterback? Because, you look around the NFL, it seems like the rookie quarterbacks struggle, but then there's this, Baker Mayfield found himself, and Sam Darnold found himself, and Geno Smith found himself. And suddenly you've got this secondary crop of failed quarterbacks, and a lot of times they're viewed as failures so early. Like Will Levis is considered a bust. Is he a bust? I mean, we don't even know. I mean, Mac Jones is a bust. Zach Wilson is a bust. I mean, all these guys are busts until they're not, right? So what do you think of a guy like Davis Mills, another Stanford guy who's pretty accurate, pretty talented, pretty, good arm strength, good mobility. He's sitting in Houston behind Stroud. What you like Mills at all? I mean, I don't like him as much as McKee, but I like him.
Yeah, I think he's okay, and I think he showed some good things because he started a decent amount of games, but I think for the Niners, like, they have that guy in Mac Jones, and I firmly believe that after Mac Jones was in an awful offensive situation with the Patriots, where after he was a Pro Bowler as a rookie, he had Matt Patricia calling plays for him as the offensive coordinator. That's a joke. Matt Patricia is now the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. And he had he had no skill position talent around him with New England. And Bill Belichick, I think, ruined his confidence because he benched Mac Jones and he put in Bailey Zappi, and then Mac Jones got to play again. And I'm not sure if Mac Jones did himself any favors because sometimes he can be a dick and sometimes he can sulk and have bad body language. But I would be frustrated too if that was the situation. And then he goes to the Jags after he got traded there, and Doug Peterson was on his way out. Everybody knew that. And so Mac Jones is another one of those quarterbacks that I think Kyle Shanahan would really like, where he gets to rehabilitate his career, Sam Darnold spoke glowingly of Brock Purdy and what he was able to learn from Purdy, saying, I've never been around a quarterback who can process that quickly. I know that people love to rip Shanahan, but look, he had Nick Mullins, CJ Beathard, Jimmy Garoppolo playing at a really high level. Brock Purdy was a top 5 MVP. Imagine what Kyle Shanahan could do with a more elite quarterback. And so I think he's going to be able to develop Mac Jones, get his confidence back on track. He's the type of quarterback who Shanahan likes. Shanahan said it this past week at the owners' meetings. Stands tall in the pocket, delivers seeds, can get the ball out, run the system, and is a good processor. His college numbers at Alabama were unbelievable. He threw like 41 touchdowns and 4 picks. Now, that team was loaded, but still, that's unbelievable production at the college level. And I think the reset for Mac Jones is going to help do him wonders. If Mac Jones were to ever get playing time, I think that Shanahan would be able to put him in a position to succeed. And that's kind of the quarterback that the Niners have brought in, along the likes of, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold type of plan, a Zach Wilson, one of these bust quarterbacks who a better situation with a better foundation can allow them to revive their careers a little bit.
There's a great article up today on Niners Nation by Kyle Posey. I don't know if you read this, but it just came up, I believe, maybe a day or two ago. One area where Brock Purdy performed like a top 5 quarterback. And he basically just says, hey, Brock Purdy has proven to be one of the more mobile quarterbacks in the NFL, and his ability to avoid sacks when pressured has been elite. I don't know if you looked at it, but, if you look at Purdy's numbers from this last year, and this is according to Next Gen Stats, Purdy was pressured 37% of the time, and he was blitzed at a 31% clip last year, both of which were 9th most in the NFL.
Wow.
So he was pressured at the 9th highest rate. He was blitzed at the 9th highest rate. Okay, so it is interesting. And Brock has a propensity to hold the ball and take unnecessary hits and sacks last year when the offensive line did not hold up. According to PFF, Purdy had one of the worst sack rates versus actual dropbacks in the league last year. But it's his ability to avoid negative plays under pressure that was stellar. Purdy finished 11th in non-running back rushing yardage this past season, despite having significantly fewer rushing attempts than most players ahead of him. He was among the league leaders in the NFL in scramble yardage, which tells you he can create on his own, and he can flip those negative plays into first downs. He finished 12th in sack percentage last year among quarterbacks who threw at least 200 passes, but he was 5th in EPA loss per sack, telling you how well Purdy's sack avoidance was in 2024. The EPA lost on sacks is basically how the players were ranked in this thing. So anyway, it basically kind of shows that Brock Purdy has handled pressure. He's gotten a lot of pressure, but he's handled it. And yet the 49ers you would think, would want him to be under less pressure and would be real eager to upgrade their offensive line. And maybe they're just in lying season and they're trying to do a misdirection. But they've come out this week and been like, hey, man, we're doubling down on McKivitz. We're doubling down on Brendel. We feel like those guys are good. And yet, once again, Brock Purdy was pressured at the 9th highest clip in football last year. So, and Brendel, I believe the Niners were 2nd worst as far as pressure rate at center, pressure rate allowed from the center position. So,
yep.
How do you make sense of the Niners approach where it's like, it seems like everybody and their brother knows the Niners need to improve their offensive line, everybody except the Niners?
Their approach to the offensive line legitimately drives me crazy. And it is something that I think about on a near weekly basis. You think back to what has happened under this regime of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Bad offensive line play has cost them and hurt them consistently in the biggest of games over the last few years. In the 2021 NFC Championship game against the Rams, the 49ers could not handle that Rams defensive line. How did that game end? When Aaron Donald got to Jimmy Garoppolo, he was forced to get rid of it quickly, bounced off of JaMychal Hasty, intercepted, game over. In 2022, in the NFC Championship game against the Philadelphia Eagles, what happened? They could not handle the Eagles defensive line that year led the NFL with 70 sacks, 15 more than any team. And I know that Tyler Kroft was blocking Hassan Reddick, but if you had better offensive line play, you would have held up better in that game. And maybe Hassan Reddick doesn't come screaming off the edge to injure Brock Purdy's elbow. Otherwise, I think the 49ers go into Philadelphia and they win that game. What happened in 2023 when the Niners made it to the Super Bowl? Brock Purdy was under siege throughout that entire game against Kansas City. And what happened on the biggest play of the game at that juncture? Nobody blocked Chris Jones, unblocked, right in Brock Purdy's grill. Had to get rid of it to Juwan Jennings, where if he had one more second, Brandon Ayuk crossed the DB up and was wide open in the end zone. And that's why it's insane to me how I'll tweet out videos of me saying the Niners need to improve their offensive line. And you have the Rich Madrids of the world who will respond to me saying they made it to the Super Bowl with Jake Brendel and Colt McKivitz. They're not the problem. Well, they gave up, 20 to 25 pressures against Kansas City in the Super Bowl, and 9 of them were unblocked. I know that Kyle Shanahan can change his drop back game. I know that Kyle Shanahan can change his pass and scheme protections. But the Niners offensive line has not been good enough. And what bothers me is that the Niners seem to be content with the offensive line just being okay. And I get that we're in a salary cap era and the Niners are paying a lot of players big time dollars and they try to get cheap along the offensive line. But Jake Brendel, while he's durable, while he's a good run blocker, when he has to go up against some of the better defensive tackles in the game, his anchor is not strong enough. I mean, he gets bulldozed, and there are a lot of bad reps on tape. Colton McKivitz 2 years ago gave up 47 pressures. Last year, did he improve? For sure. But Colton McKivitz and Jake Brendel were still, according to Pro Football Focus, some of the lowest graded players at their positions in key categories. And it's cost this Niners team. And the other thing that blows my mind, if Brock Purdy weren't so mobile, if Brock Purdy didn't have those spidey senses in the pocket,
he's making them look better than they are.
Flip out of the pocket like a Tony Romo back in the day and make plays happen improvisationally out of structure, the offensive line numbers would be even worse. And so they invested a second rounder in Aaron Banks. He got paid. I'd never pay him that. They traded for Trent Williams. They paid him a lot of money. Good on you. But to try to get by at center with Jake Brendel and at right tackle with Colton McKivitz, and then at left guard, it could be a competition between Ben Barch and Spencer Burford. They're trying to get creative with financial dollars being allocated to those positions in a creative way where they're not spending that much money, where I just think they have to bring in better players. And look, they brought in Weston Richburg. He played well. He got hurt. They paid Alex Mack. He played well. He retired. But over the last couple of years, like, this offensive line has really cost them. And I just hate how they're just content with it being an okay unit. If the Niners were to go up against the Philadelphia Eagles, especially that defensive line that they had last year, Brock Purdy would be running for his life. They would have no shot. This upcoming season, if Jake Brendel has to match up against Jalen Carter, if Colton McKivitz has to go up against a Nolan Smith or an Aiden Hutchinson, we've seen him struggle against the likes of TJ Watt. Like, he gets exposed. Jake Brendel gets exposed when they play against some good talent. So the offensive line philosophy, it just drives me insane. That can change in the NFL draft. It can change, and I hope it does. But as of right now, for them to say, oh, yeah, we like Jake Brendel. He was good last year. We like Colton McKivitz. It's just not good enough, in my opinion.
And it's not even your opinion. I mean, it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't good enough. You won 6 games. You know, I mean, your quarterback has got great mobility. Did you see how bad the Niners offense looked when they had to go with their backup quarterback who didn't have mobility? It was terrible. It was awful. They had no shot at all. They were almost not worth watching. So, this is now we're up at the 11th pick. What do you do with the 11th pick? Do you trade back? Do you trade up? Do you take an offensive lineman? Do you go defensive tackle? How would you play your hand at 11? People suggesting, there's an article today, CBS Sports says Niners predicted to trade up with the Jaguars for Purdy's franchise left tackle of the future. And the idea is that the Niners would trade up with Jacksonville. Jacksonville would trade back to 11. Jacksonville at 11 would take Tyler Warren. The Niners at 5 would take Armand Membu. Would you move into the top 5 for Armand Membu? I don't think I would. I think I would stay where I'm at and play the board. If anything, I'm trading back. I'm not trading up. There's no way I'm trading up in this draft.
Yeah. If I do trade up, it's not for Armand Membu, who is my favorite tackle in this class. If he's between 8 and 10, I'd trade up for that. A way that I would trade up into the top 5 is if there's any way that Abdul Carter falls. He has the foot injury, he has the shoulder injury. If teams get quarterback happy there early, and there's just a possibility that Abdul Carter falls a little bit, which I don't think is going to happen, that's the type of player who I trade up for. Which brings me to this point. I know we just got done talking about the offensive line. There are several needs there. Left guard, center, right tackle, not good enough. But along the defensive line, they have even greater needs. They don't have good defensive tackles. The edge rusher opposite of Nick Bosa is an issue. If the Niners were to play a game right now, their starting front 4 would be Yetur Gross-Matos, Jordan Elliott, Evan Anderson, and Nick Bosa. The backups at defensive tackle would be Kalia Davis and Kevin Givens. And then the backup behind Yetur Gross-Matos would be Sam Okuanu. The backup behind Nick Bosa would be Robert Beal. That's a bottom 5 defensive line in the NFL. And so what I would do if I'm the Niners, I'm going best player available at either defensive tackle or edge. And I like Walter Nolan at defensive tackle. I like Derek Harmon at defensive tackle. I like Kenneth Grant. I like Mason Graham. There's an opportunity that he might fall. At defensive end, I might take a chance on Mike Green. I know the Niners are really scared probably about that, given what has happened in their past with taking players with character concerns. But my gosh, it's hard to pass up on 17 sacks and 22 TFLs and twitch, bend, speed, good production. The tape popped against Ohio State, and that's what Mike Green is all about. Jalen Walker is a player who can play edge and off-ball linebacker. I know you and I are really big fans of his. So those are the players who I like the most at defensive tackle and edge that I would be kind of pinpointing there for the Niners at number 11. And I think that's the direction that they go. Even if, a Will Campbell or a Kelvin Banks is on the board, I still think the Niners will and should go defensive tackle or edge at number 11.
There was a great art. I love the content that Warren Sharp puts out.
Yeah, it's great.
I think Warren Sharp is, really sharp, and he's got this sharp football analysis. He put out a thing this week of his top 50 players, his NFL draft big board. And then he put out, like a breakdown of each player. And basically he has, let's say Travis Hunter to start, where he'll make an impact in the NFL. And then what are his weaknesses? What concerns do teams have? So I just want to throw a couple of these at your way and tell me, where you're just the concerns, because we all know these guys are all great. Okay, let's start with Abdul Carter. It says, although it was for relatively minor offenses, Carter was arrested multiple times at Penn State, once as recently as April of 2024. Questions about his maturity are warranted, and interested teams will spend as much time with him before the draft as possible to assess the risk factor. On the field, he'll need to continue refining his technique so he's more than just a speed rusher. So I'm obviously the off-field stuff's a concern, but on the field, I the more I watch Abdul Carter, the more I think that the people that are comparing him to Micah Parsons are high. Micah Parsons is way stronger than Abdul Carter. Micah Parsons wins with power or with speed. I think Abdul Carter, based on what I've seen, wins with speed. And I don't even see great moves or awesome, redirect or counters or, working back inside. I mean, I see a guy who's looking to dip the shoulder and get to the edge. I mean, he's a speed and more speed kind of a guy. So I think if you can kick out and neutralize that speed and make him counter back inside, I don't know. And then the off-field issues, concerns are an issue for me. Multiple arrests shows that you just bad decision making, which makes me wonder about, when he gets some money in his pocket, what's gonna happen. So
Yeah.
that's my concern about Abdul Carter. Okay. Then the Mason Graham one, it says teams can run at Graham due to his lack of size and length. He can also be controlled by double teams, so he'll need solid supporting cast around him to reach his full potential. I also see a guy that doesn't get a lot done as a third down rusher. I mean, I love Mason Graham, chase on first and second down, but on third down, I think there's probably a handful of guys that are better than him. I don't see a super special on player on third down, so that worries me. And then we'll go to like Shamar Stewart. He needs to further his development as a pass rusher, learn to attack with a plan. Only 4.5 career sacks is definitely a red flag. He also ranked 20th in FBS in pressure rate, so the lack of sacks doesn't tell the full story. This guy does get pressures, and he does play hard, but hand usage is a major part about being a pass rusher in the NFL, and Stewart has no concept of, he's like Ned in the first reader. He's like the beginning of time. He's so raw with his hand usage. He has no idea where to put them. He has no idea how to use them. He's just super, super raw from a technical standpoint.
Freak athlete. I don't know if he's a great football player.
Mikael Williams, partially due to injuries, Williams doesn't have a ton of experience, and his pass rushing technique remains raw. He lacks the elite traits to win with athleticism and effort alone, so he'll need to develop an array of pass rush moves to reach his potential. I love this guy walking through the door on the hoof. He's the guy. He's the first. This is the guy who's, leading the team, first guy off the bus, as they say. But he's been at Georgia for a while. The fact that he hasn't really honed in on pass rush technique makes me fear that the Niners are going to invest in a first-round version of Robert Beal, who hasn't done squat with the Niners. He just can't even get on the field. Derek Harmon says, although Harmon's a decent athlete, he lacks movement skills, probably can't replicate his impressive 11.2 pressure rate from the interior, and his numbers against the run are horrible. He's really got bad numbers against the run. And then we get down to the two tackles that I really like, Walter Nolan and Kenneth Grant. For Grant, they say, although he's athletic for his size, Grant lacks the truly elite movement skills of other outliers at his size, such as Jordan Davis, Dexter Lawrence. If that different limits his effectiveness at other spots on the line, maybe he's just a nose guard, which would make him significantly less valuable. So I think that's why people might be a little down on Grant. They don't think he's anything more than a nose. And then Nolan's negative. The production never fully lived up to the hype and the traits for the former five-star recruit. Nolan generated a mediocre 6.7% pressure rate when lined up at the 3 technique spot last year for Ole Miss. So, there are negatives on all these guys. There's no such thing as a perfect prospect. But how would you start knowing what cognizant of what I just threw out to you as far as the negatives on the guys they may take? Does it change your thought process at all on who you would want to take at 11 or how you'd want to play your hand?
Yeah, obviously some red flags there with Abdul Carter. I think it's pretty telling that Drew Rosenhaus was willing to be his agent. I don't think that Drew Rosenhaus messes around with a lot of stuff like that. I think what's so impressive about him is that this past year in 2024 was his first year as a full-time edge rusher, and he was highly productive. Penn State did list him at 250. We don't know how much he weighs because he didn't do anything at the combine, and because of the foot and shoulder injury, didn't run at the pro day either. And so that's a little bit of a concern. Will that cause him to slip? I still don't think he gets outside of the top 3 or 4, but I think that he's going to be a really good player at the next level. He's my favorite player in this draft class if he's able to stay healthy. Mason Graham, he weighed in 25 pounds less than what Michigan listed him as. According to Pro Football Focus, he was good against the run. He was a good pass rusher. But how much is that due to him playing on the same line alongside Josiah Stewart, good player, probably a 2nd or 3rd round pick at edge rusher, and Kenneth Grant right next to him? Walter Nolan seems like a safe pick. I know the pressure rate is low, and I know that he didn't do a ton prior to going to Ole Miss from Texas A&M, But look, number 1 overall recruit in his high school class, and this past year, 6+ sacks, 30+ pressures. I'll take the chance with the explosion and the quick get off at the line of scrimmage. I also love his motor, and his interviews have gone well in the pre-draft process. Kenneth Grant, I think he's too early to take at number 11. Derek Harmon, more than 300 pounds. He ran a sub-5 40-yard dash, but there are concerns there about his ability to stop the run, or should I say inability. Sneakily, though, I think he's a good player. So, look, I think the Niners are going to have their pick of the litter at number 11. I think there's going to be several really good players there. I think about players who don't really have a lot of question marks who could be on the board at number 11. A Jahad Campbell, the linebacker out of Alabama. I think that he could be a plug-and-play starter right from the jump. Jalen Walker, I really don't have many concerns. Can play off-ball linebacker or can blitz the quarterback. A player like Tyler Warren. Look, Trey McBride just got that contract extension from Arizona. I think it might cost the Niners $20 million per year if they want to give George Kittle a contract extension. Do you have him play out the final year of his deal and take Tyler Warren, who I think is going to be a great pro for the next 10 years? He doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, in my opinion. And so there are some safe picks. There are a lot of picks who have a lot of question marks. But this draft class for the Niners is so important. They have to hit on several picks, and they're not just relying on these players to be good players. These players are going to have to play big roles in 2025 because they still have so many holes remaining on this roster after letting all these players go.
Yeah. One of the stories this week I thought was interesting. Kyle Posey in Niners Nation said, he had a quote here: NFL executives on the Niners offseason, they're putting a lot of trust in their ability to draft. Mike Sando from The Athletic reached out to NFL executives and asked their thoughts on the Niners offseason. And, one guy's like, hey, yeah, it's like one guy said, one exec said, it's easy to spend the way they've spent when you're in the NFC championships. It's not easy when you're 6-11 and the roster is getting older. And now you have to pay Brock Purdy. You aren't just tacking on 50 to 60 million to that roster, but they haven't gone after their core. The Niners have let a lot of their core go. Another executive says they're putting a lot of trust in their ability to draft, but also, not surprisingly, they're like, well, we can get Malik Mustafa and Jair Brown, turn them into starters. So why keep paying all these other guys coming off a 6-win season? They're keeping the true difference makers and letting go of those they feel were overpaid now or resting on their laurels. So I guess what makes me nervous is that the 49ers are all, I love that they're all in on the draft because I'm a believer in the draft as the building mechanism that you need to utilize to develop that championship. You're not signing free agents to go win a championship. You have to draft. But who's who the Niners have invested day 1 and day 2 picks in this regime. Okay. These are day 1 and day 2 picks from this regime. Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster, Ahkello Witherspoon, C.J. Beathard, 2017, 0 for 4. 2018, Mike McGlinchey, Dante Pettis, Fred Warner. So they've hit one time out of 7. They're 1 for 7. Okay. Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel, Jalen Hurd. Okay, they went 2 out of 3 there, but Bosa was the second pick in the draft. Javon Kinlaw, Brandon Ayuk, Trey Lance, Aaron Banks, Trey Sermon, Ambry Thomas, Drake Jackson, Ty Davis-Price, Danny Gray, Jair Brown, Cam Latu, Jake Moody.
That's a joke.
Ricky Pearsall, Renardo Green, Dom Pooney. So they had a good year this last year, but the Niners are all in on the draft. And I got to ask the question, why so many gaffes with the first pick? Why? Their first picks have been Pearsall, Jair Brown, Drake Jackson, Trey Lance, Javon Kinlaw, Nick Bosa, Mike McGlinchey, Solomon Thomas. It's basically Thomas bust, McGlinchey no, Bosa was good, Kinlaw no, Lance hell no,
Ayuk in
Jackson
there
no.
too.
Yeah, Ayuk was a first. But I mean, as far as
Yeah.
first pick overall, Jair Brown, I kind of like him. Pearsall, I kind of like him. Why have the Niners had so many gaffes in the first round? Why are they having a hard time drafting on day 1 and day 2, but they're finding DJ Jones? I mean, if you look at their draft record, day 3 finds include Malik Mustafa, Isaac Guerendo this year. Who else? Brock Purdy in 2022. Samuel Womack, Spencer Burford. Demo Lenore in 2021. Afanga and Mitchell as well. Jawan Jennings in 20. Dre Greenlaw in 19. DJ Reed in 18.
They messed that situation up.
They messed that up. They let him get out of there. George Kittle, DJ Jones in 17. I mean, they've landed way more talent on day 3 than they've landed with their first picks overall. Why all the first pick gaffes for the Niners? And does it make you nervous about the fact that they're all in on this draft, and it's almost like there's nowhere else to turn? They either have to have a monster draft or they're not going to be a very good team, and this could be the end of the regime.
Yeah. The future of the organization, I think, hinges on the 2025 class and the 2026 draft class. And this is why it's always so interesting covering the Niners, is because there are so many things that have happened under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch that haven't made a lot of sense. Like, on one end, that 2023 team and the teams prior that made it to the Super Bowl and NFC Championship game were some of the most talented teams in the NFL. And a lot of those players were homegrown and drafted by San Francisco. On the other end, they have had so many bad whiffs and misses where it's resulted in us being in this point where we're at right now, where they are bereft of talent and depth, and they've had to let a lot of these players go because they need to replenish through the draft because they don't have a lot of quality players on the roster right now, and they have so many holes. But you think about this team that's made it to 4 NFC Championship games and 2 Super Bowls in the last 6 years. Who are the headliners on this team, right? Brock Purdy, drafted by the Niners. Brandon Ayuk, All-Pro, drafted by the Niners. Deebo Samuel, All-Pro, drafted by the Niners. George Kittle, All-Pro, drafted by the Niners. Jawan Jennings, one of the more underrated Niners of this era, drafted by the Niners. Nick Bosa, drafted by the Niners. Fred Warner, drafted by the Niners. Deommodore Lenoir, drafted by the Niners. Talanoa Hufanga, another All-Pro, drafted by the Niners. That is a very talented team, and we've seen it with our eyes. That 2023 team should have won the Super Bowl, and these conversations would be completely different if they finished that game, didn't shoot themselves in the foot, and didn't have a lackluster performance from coaching to player execution to choking in a couple of different big spots. But it is odd. Now, if you want confidence in the Niners' plans to build through the draft, look at what they did last year. Ricky Pearsall in the first round, I still think it was a reach, but I think that he can be a very solid player. Renardo Green in the second round, he's going to be your starting corner opposite of Deommodore Lenoir. In the third round, Dominic Puni, one of the top right guards in football last year. Malik Mustafa, I think, is a blossoming star. You got him in the fourth round. If Isaac Guerendo can stay healthy, we're talking about a back who's 220, runs a 4.3, has a lot of ability. You got him in the fourth round. And so you needed to hit with that draft class. And I think the Niners did have some foresight too. They had an idea, maybe we'll lose Deebo. We need a wide receiver. Let's draft Ricky Pearsall. Charvarius Ward is probably going to get $20 million a year in free agency. We draft Renardo Green. Aaron Banks could get paid if the guard market explodes. It did. He got $19 million per year. We drafted Dominic Puni. Talanoa Hufanga, going to be a free agent. We drafted Malik Mustafa. Jordan Mason could be expensive to keep. Let's draft Isaac Guerendo. And so the Niners, with what they've done this offseason, letting all these players go, they've pinned themselves into a corner. And they put pressure on themselves where they have to hit. Of the 11 picks, 5, 6 of them have to be impact players kind of right from the jump. Like, I don't think that's a hyperbolic statement to make. You need 2 defensive tackles and an edge rusher out of this class. You could probably use another running back out of this class. You might need to take a linebacker in this class. A corner is also pretty important too. And so I like the strategy of building through the draft. I'm a fan of that. I think you win by doing that because you have these young players on cost-controlled contracts and you replenish the cupboard as far as talent goes. And then when your players leave to get paid, you replace them with young players who are ready to go. But the Niners have put a lot of pressure on themselves to hit on all of these picks because they've let all of these starters go when they didn't even have to let all of them go. They cut free Leonard, Floyd, Malik Collins, and others. And now they're going to need these young players to step in. And look, I don't know if this is a coincidence, but it is kind of odd how Adam Peters was revered with the Niners. He leaves to go to Washington. Then the Niners have one of their best draft classes that they've had in recent memory. So did he have a little bit too much say and sway? I have no idea. But the Niners pretty much need to replicate their success that they had from the 2024 draft this year and next year, because I think they have something like 21 or 22 picks the next 2 drafts within the first 4 rounds. And
gotta make it happen.
If you hit on a lot of those picks, you'll set yourself up for the future. If you don't, the end of this regime could be near.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's not over dramatic. I don't believe in the slightest. A couple last things before we get out of here. As the Niners are trying to continue to negotiate a long-term extension with Purdy, there's a report out this morning, the latest episode of Scoop City podcast with the Athletics' Diana Rossini. She's saying no teams have called the Niners to engage in trade talks about the quarterback. I don't know why anybody would. The Niners have made it perfectly clear that they want this player. She says, unlike previous years, the Niners have allowed top players to seek a trade amid these contract holdouts and contract talks. But there's been no indication they're even entertaining the idea of dealing Purdy right now. So to me, that's why why are they not getting calls? They're not getting calls because they've told everybody and their brother that they want this player.
Yeah.
Jordan Schultz says there's an expectation Purdy's extension could land between 50 and 55 million annually, or potentially more whenever it gets done. I think that's probably accurate. The Niners under Purdy are 23-13. He also led them to a Super Bowl berth. This year, 20 touchdowns, 12 picks, 65.9% completion percentage. When Rossini says nobody's calling on Purdy, I don't think that should be confused with there is no interest in Brock Purdy around the NFL. I just think that that's an indication that the Niners have been very transparent in their intentions, and everybody knows that their goal is to, he's their guy and they want to get him signed. To me, the fact that nobody's called to talk about trading for him, that's hardly a story in my mind.
No, I agree. I mean, teams aren't calling the Chiefs about Patrick Mahomes, the Eagles about Jalen Hurts, the Texans about CJ Stroud, the Commanders about Jaden Daniels. They know that those quarterbacks are locked in and they're staying there with their organizations. And all of what the Niners have said publicly is that Brock Purdy is our guy. I mean, Jed York just said a couple of days ago, we decided to commit to him last year during the 2024 season.
2 last thoughts. Are the Eagles going to move Bryce Huff during the draft? What's their plan with Bryce Huff? And could you see Bryce Huff to the Niners? I know I mentioned it to you. I don't know if you talked about it on chat.
I did.
All. But what do you think? I mean, what are you hearing about Bryce Huff? Because, man, that guy looked like one of the more dangerous edge rushers with the Jets not that long ago. And now he gets moved in the Reddick deal to Philly. And it was a lose-lose. I mean, both teams lost in that deal, but they haven't cut him. He's still on their roster. I get the feeling Howie's going to try to squeeze somebody for a day 3 pick. What do you think?
No, I agree, and I think that a business's actions always speak loudly. A team's actions always speak loudly. If you're in a relationship, your partner's actions speak loudly, right? What did the Eagles do last year? Bryce Huff was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl. Their rookie, Jalix Hunt, was the player who they played instead of Bryce Huff. Vic Fangio didn't like him from the jump. He played him deep into preseason games, wasn't running with the ones in training camp all year, didn't give him a ton of snaps. And then in the playoffs, he was a complete non-factor. Then what did the Eagles do this offseason? Signed Josh Uche, 1-year deal. Signed Azeez Ojulari, 1-year deal. They have Jalex Hunt. They have Nolan Smith. Brandon Graham retired, but if they draft a defensive end early, that's 5 defensive ends on your team. And so I think the Eagles are really, at this point, just trying to get out of that Bryce Huff contract. And I think that they would take a 5th or 6th round pick for him. This is a player who had 10 sacks and I believe 40 to 50 pressures 2 years ago with the Jets when Robert Saleh was still their head coach. And he did all of that in less than 50% of the snaps played. And so if I'm the Niners, I'm bringing in Bryce Huff. He's a great scheme fit for the wide 9. Robert Saleh knows him, has familiarity with him, brought the best out of him, saw him develop from a UDFA out of Memphis into a player who got $34 million in guaranteed money. He has no more guaranteed money left on his deal after 2025, and the Niners have multiple needs at defensive end. So that's a player who, if I'm San Francisco, either during the draft or after the draft, depending on what you do with your draft plans, they have a lot of cap space available. I know some of that's going to be given to Brock Purdy, but I'm making a move for Bryce Huff to see if he can be that guy opposite of Nick Bosa.
Last thought here. Reader on one of the, I forget the guy's name. Let's see here. What's his name? Chad Reuter, I should say, did a 4-round mock draft. Looks like a 5-round mock draft. Anyway, here's his projections for the Niners. He has them trading. Now, let's see who he has them taking in the first round. Let's see. Will
Campbell.
Had
Will Campbell, I think.
Yeah, so he's got the Niners taking Will Campbell in round 1. Trey Amos, the Ole Miss corner, at 43. I do think they'll go corner at some point. Fadil Diggs from Syracuse at 75. Not loving that pick, but the rest of these picks I do love. Quincy Riley from Louisville in round 3. Dylan Sampson, very productive running back from Tennessee in round 4. Nick Martin, who's going to be on the Krug show, I believe, this week from Oak State. Round 4. Mitchell Evans, the Notre Dame tight end, in round 5. And then CJ West, the big defensive tackle from Indiana, in round 5. If this is the way it goes, what do you think of this haul in the first 5 rounds?
Yeah, I think Will Campbell can play tackle or guard. I know people don't like his arm length, but he talked about that at the combine. He said, look, I know I have shorter arms, but I make up for that with foot quickness and technique. And I love his nastiness and athleticism and the experience and long-term production at LSU playing in the SEC. So I think that he could be a good player for the Niners. I think he's a good scheme fit. I think you have a big need at corner still because you don't have a third, and Trey Amos can be that guy. Other players I kind of like on that list, like Dylan Sampson, very productive at Tennessee. CJ West in the 5th round. I would really like the Niners to pick him up, and that's one of their sweet rounds is that 5th. So yeah. I'd be okay with that. I don't think it's an A. I think it's kind of like a B-, but I don't hate it.
What's your favorite option at 11?
Oh, man.
I mean, I'm here. I'll tell you where I'm at. I'm torn because on one hand, I just think Kenneth Grant is the kind of big-bodied defensive tackle that the Niners really need to keep. I like some of these linebackers, but there's a lot of really undersized linebackers. So I want a big, physical, off defensive line that can, take up some of the offensive linemen, not let them climb to the second level. So I like Kenneth Grant. But then the more I watch Walter Nolan, the more I think, man, Walter Nolan is so damn good. He's probably a little bit more of a pass rusher. I'm a little concerned durability wise about him, but other than that, I really love him. And then there's Jalon Walker. And to me, Jalon Walker, I think, is a NFL Defensive Player of the Year candidate. I think he's worlds better than who's the Eagles guy that was Nakobe Dean. He's worlds better. Than
he's so much better than Nakobe Dean. He was a 3rd-round pick. Yeah.
I mean, he's a much better athlete than Nakobe Dean. I love him a lot more than Mikael Williams, who's his tag team partner on the other end. I don't know if he's a defensive end, Chase. I think he's a linebacker, but I think he's potentially a Pro Bowl linebacker. And I would have a hard time passing on Jalon Walker.
Yeah. So Armand Membu, if he's there at number 11, I'm racing in the pick to Roger Goodell. I know some people might think it's a reach, but I just think Walter Nolan's going to be really good. So I like him. And then I think Walker, I just think he's a safe pick. And I think he's going to be really good for a long time. And I know I've said this a couple of times. The pass rush, off-ball linebacker coverage versatility, the maturity coming from being a coach's son, being a leader, the athleticism, I think it all translates. So those are the three players that I probably like the best for the Niners there.
Nolan, Membu, and Walker.
Yep.
Yeah, I have no problem with any of those guys. I think Membu looks awesome.
I think he looks awesome, man.
I think he looks like he's not going to be there. That's what I would say.
Yes, I think he could go in the top 5.
How the short arms thing, is that a concern?
No, I think his arms are fine. I think he was like 33 inches.
Yeah.
He was 33 inches. He ran a sub-5 40-yard dash, and when he went up against some of the top edge rushers in the SEC, he shut them all down. So, character, it's great.
Yeah, let's hit these supers and we're out. Mr. Irrelevant, it's not a super, but he says Niners looking to trade for Trey Hendrickson. I mean, that's exciting for a lot of Niner fans. Is there any truth to that? What do you think, Chase?
I'm seeing if there's anything that's kind of
like percolating new. Yeah, I had
NFL teams reportedly didn't think the Bengals were serious about a Trey Hendrickson trade, but they did sign Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and gave them crazy money. They weren't smart with how they didn't manipulate the cap, so I think he could get moved, but I don't think the Niners are going to take on that price tag.
Yeah, and
because they got to give him an extension.
Right. I mean, you got to remember this. If you've heard, look at it this way. And a buddy of mine who's down there with the Niners said this to me about 5 days ago. He said, if you've heard of these guys, they're probably not our guys. If you haven't heard of these guys, that probably means they are our guys. In other words, they're going to build in the draft. And they're going to look for guys that they think are big time in the draft. And they're not looking for household names in free agency. The one name in free agency, though I have seen them tied to in the last 48 hours, is Asante Samuel Jr. What do you think's the likelihood? Who he's battled some stingers, so that's his issue. Would you make a play for Asante Samuel? To me, I like the idea of Florida State Renardo, Florida State Asante Samuel, and Demo together. And I'd love to see the Niners get that corner need scratched off before the draft, because I agree they need a corner, and you can't find corners unless you draft them early. And I think they need to invest those early picks in other spots. So if they could get Samuel and save that early round pick for another spot, that's the route I'd go.
Man, in a cornerback market where Mooney Ward got 20, Carlton Davis got 20, DJ Reed got 16, 17, I can't believe that Asante Samuel Jr., who just got done his rookie contract and is still in his mid-20s as a young player who has ball skills and instincts and has a lot of good pass breakup numbers, didn't have a bigger market. Now, I think what that would signal is he's shorter, but he's been an outside guy. So I think you'd have Asante Samuel Jr. and Renardo Green on the outside. And I'm fine with putting Diamador Lenore in the slot because he's been so elite there his entire career. And teams are starting to go 3-4 wide more consistently anyway. And that's a really good secondary. Now, again, shoulder injury, as you mentioned, a little bit of a concern. His pops was a hell of a player, different player. He was a gambler, reading the eyes of the quarterback, and sometimes he would over-pursue, overstep, trying to get interceptions. But Asante Samuel Jr. has a little bit of that big playability that his pops was made famous for.
Two supers, and then we'll bail out of here. Jalen LeGrant says, Nafoa Fia Tulafono, instant Brendel replacement, just slings guys around, plays super angry. Curtis Rourke or Kyle McCord would be my backup quarterbacks to target. Have you heard of this guy, Tulafono?
Wyoming Cowboys center.
Really? I got to check him out.
6'2", 324 pounds.
And he throws guys around. I like the
idea. I love it, Jalen.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's his last name again?
Tulafono.
Tulafono. I don't see him on my list. I gotta have to dig him. He must be deep on the list.
Nafoa Fia Tulafono.
It's a great name. It's a great name. I'll check him out. And we got this one from Showtime 2118. He says, shouldn't McGlinchey and Banks both be considered hits in the draft? These guys are getting paid big money by other teams.
Not when you took McGlinchey at 11 or 9?
Yeah, 9.
Yeah, he wasn't good enough to be the 9th overall pick.
look at it this way. If you aren't willing to invest in second contracts with your guys,
Exactly.
they weren't worth it.
And he hasn't been good for Denver.
Yeah, he hasn't been good for Denver. And as far as Banks, I mean, Banks got overpaid by somebody, but
Way overpaid.
I think I hear what you're saying, though, Showtime. Basically, I would say they probably shouldn't be considered busts, but they're also not hits. They're definitely not hits.
Yeah, Banks was a 3-year starter as a second-round pick. That's, probably a hit,
Probably a hit.
Yeah.
But, a hit that you couldn't afford, and also a hit that you didn't want to invest in long term.
Right.
All right, that does it for us. What do you got cooking the rest of the day?
Man, a lot of good draft content just coming out this time of year, so be on the lookout for it on the 49ers Report.
Sounds good. Everybody give Chase and Chat Sports a like and subscribe over there. Hit a like and subscribe right here. Thanks to all you guys. Thanks to Pig in a Pickle. We'll catch you guys. I'm going to do some more stuff later on today. I'm actually going to go doing a little in-game Chase Senior. We're going to go, what's it called? Watch party. We're going to go watch party on the Giants opening day today. We're going to throw some beers back, and then I've got some Niners nightly tonight on KMBR at 6 o'clock. Looking forward to that. For Chase, I'm Larry. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks for tuning into the Krug Show. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful.